If you feel you've outgrown everyone, watch this. Alan Watts' most dangerous lesson. Outgrowing people is not a sign that you are better than them. It is a sign that life is inviting you to become more honest about who you really are. You are not wrong for changing, but no one tells you how violent growth feels when it begins to quietly separate you from the people you once loved most. One day you are laughing at the same jokes, sharing the same habits, moving in the same direction. Then, without any dramatic explosion, you simply notice you don't belong to that conversation anymore. It begins in very small ways. The gossip that once felt entertaining now feels heavy. The weekend that used to be about numbing yourself suddenly feels like a waste of your limited burning time on this earth. You look around and realize you are no longer hungry for the same things, no longer satisfied by the same distractions. Something inside you is shedding its skin. Alan Watts often explained that life is a dance, not a straight line. A dance means you don't stay in the same position forever. You turn, you bend, you step forward and back. But most people secretly want life to be a static photograph. They want the same friends, the same roles, the same identity forever. When you start to move with the dance, they may experience your growth as an insult. Outgrowing people is dangerous, not because growth is wrong, but because your mind can easily misunderstand what is happening. One danger is arrogance. You begin to see the illusions you once lived in, and you might look down on those who still live there. You forget that you too were once asleep, once clinging to the same habits, once terrified of change. Wisdom without humility becomes spiritual ego wearing enlightened clothes. Another danger is isolation. When your inner world changes faster than your outer world, you can feel like an exile in your own life. You sit at the same table with the same faces, but your soul feels like a stranger. You start to speak a different language, a language of responsibility, awareness, and inner peace, while others still speak the language of blame, distraction, and drama. The emotional distance becomes louder than any words. Alan Watts often said that who you think you are is only a pattern, a story, a temporary arrangement of experiences. When that story begins to change, the cast of characters around you will also change. The people who were perfect for the old you may not be compatible with the person you are becoming. This doesn't make them villains or you a saint. It simply means the story is moving into a new chapter. But we resist this. We try to shrink ourselves to keep familiar people comfortable. You pretend to laugh at things that don't amuse you anymore. You pretend to agree with opinions that no longer align with your conscience. You pretend you are still the old version of yourself because you are afraid of being labeled too much, too deep, or too serious. In that pretending, you slowly betray your own soul. There is also a more subtle danger using spiritual language to avoid responsibility. You say, I've outgrown everyone. No one is on my level. When in reality, you are afraid of intimacy, feedback, and vulnerability. Claiming that you have outgrown everyone can be a sophisticated way of hiding from the uncomfortable work of honest relationships. Growth that isolates you from all mirrors is not growth, it is escape dressed as enlightenment. To truly grow, as what would remind us, is to realize your connection to everything, not your superiority over it. Outgrowing someone does not mean you are higher, it means your path has curved in a different direction. You can love people without walking the same road. You can bless their journey without needing to travel with them. The tree does not hate the seed just because it became something else. Notice how life first invites you to outgrow your own habits before it ever asks you to outgrow other people. The late nights that leave you empty, the conversations that drain your energy, the arguments that repeat every week. These are signals. Your nervous system is quietly telling you, we cannot keep living like this. People around you may still be comfortable in that chaos. You are not. That is the beginning of outgrowing. The real crisis appears when you finally act on what you feel. Maybe you stop replying to certain messages as quickly. Maybe you refuse to participate in gossip. Maybe you start saying, no, I can't make it tonight because you are choosing sleep, discipline, or study over mindless repetition. Suddenly, people who benefited from your old self feel betrayed by your new boundaries. They will say you have changed and they are right. They may call you distant, cold, selfish, or proud. But what if your distance is actually you learning to honor your energy? What if your coldness is just you refusing to perform emotional warmth where your soul feels disrespected? What if your selfishness is simply you choosing not to abandon yourself for others' comfort anymore? Alan Watts invited us to see that clinging is the root of suffering. You suffer when you cling to the past version of yourself and the past version of others. Outgrowing people becomes dangerous when you keep clinging to relationships that are already complete. You don't allow them to end, you don't allow them to transform. Instead, you drag their corpse into the present and call it loyalty. There is a deep grief in growth that people rarely talk about. You don't just lose people, you lose shared memories, shared language, shared versions of yourself. You might miss the days when ignorance felt like freedom, when you weren't aware of all the psychological patterns playing out. You might miss laughing about shallow things simply because it meant you weren't thinking so much. That grief is not a sign you're going backwards, it's proof that your heart is still open. At the same time, there is a quiet beauty in this loneliness. When you no longer fit into places that used to hold you, you have to build a life that matches your deeper values. You are forced to confront what you truly care about, what kind of conversations nourish you, what kind of friendships feel safe, what kind of love matches the honesty you are cultivating inside. Growth demands that you answer these questions with actions, not just words. Another danger of outgrowing everyone around you is the temptation to rush into new circles just to avoid being alone. You may quickly attach yourself to any spiritual group, any high value community, or any conscious relationship that promises understanding. But if you haven't integrated the lessons from your old life, you will simply repeat the same patterns in a new setting with better language and more expensive clothes. Watts would gently remind you that enlightenment is not a costume, it's the end of pretending. So before you look for new people who get you, sit with yourself long enough to get yourself, learn your triggers, your illusions, your self-deceptions. Notice the parts of you that still crave approval and validation. If you skip this step, you will simply build a new prison with more aesthetically pleasing walls. When you outgrow people, it is crucial to replace judgment with compassion. Not everyone is meant to walk at your pace. Some souls need more time in certain lessons. Others are fighting battles you cannot see. You are not the measuring stick of consciousness. The goal is not to collect spiritual points, but to live more honestly, more kindly, and more courageously with the truth you have discovered. There is also the danger of nostalgia. You will occasionally look back and wonder, was it really that bad? Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should go back. But remember why you left. Remember the version of yourself you had to become in order to survive in that environment. Remember the anxiety, the self-betrayal, the quiet heartbreak of pretending. Growth means trusting your memory, not romanticizing your pain. Sometimes, outgrowing people doesn't mean cutting them off. It means changing the role they play in your life. Perhaps the friend you used to party with is no longer your emotional advisor. Perhaps the family member you used to confide in is no longer safe for your deeper dreams. You can still love them, visit them, laugh with them, but you no longer hand them the steering wheel of your destiny. Alan Watts spoke often about the illusion of control. You cannot control who evolves with you. You cannot drag someone into their own awakening. You can share your truth, but you cannot make them ready to hear it. You can invite them into change, but you cannot make them endure the discomfort that change requires. The more you try to force their growth, the more resentment and resistance you create. So, what do you do when you feel you've outgrown everyone around you? First, you surrender the idea that you are alone in the universe. You may not yet have found your people, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. There are souls who will respect your boundaries, celebrate your discipline, and meet you in depth instead of mocking it. But you only meet them when you stop shrinking yourself to remain acceptable to the wrong audience. Second, you begin to live as if your new frequency is already valid. You follow your curiosity, your creativity, your inner peace. You build habits that match the life you say you want. You become the kind of friend you wish you had. You talk to life, to God, to the cosmos, whatever word you use, and you say, I am willing to walk alone rather than walk against myself. That is a powerful, silent prayer. Third, you practice gentle honesty with those you are outgrowing. You don't need to dramatize the separation. You don't have to announce, I'm done with you, I'm too spiritual now. You can simply let the relationship breathe in a new way. Less access, less emotional labor, less pretending, more truth, more boundaries, more acceptance that every connection has its season. The danger of outgrowing everyone is real: arrogance, isolation, nostalgia, spiritual bypassing. But there is an even greater danger: refusing to grow so that no one ever accuses you of changing. If you choose comfort over evolution, you may keep your circle, but you will lose yourself. And the silent regret of an unlived life is heavier than the loneliness of an honest one. Alan Watts would likely smile and say that you are not a fixed person walking through time. You are the universe playing a temporary role. Some roles end, some stages close, some characters exit the scene. Your task is not to cling to what was, but to participate fully in what is, to bow gracefully when the dance changes, and to trust that the music will always return in a new form. So, if you feel like you are outgrowing everyone, breathe. You are not broken, you are becoming. You are not superior, you are simply listening to a call they may not yet hear. Thank the people who were teachers in your old chapter, even if they taught you through pain, and then, with quiet courage, step into the empty space your growth has created. That empty space is not a punishment, it is the doorway to your next life. Walk forward with tenderness. Honor the versions of you that needed those people and the versions of them that once needed you. But do not go back to what you have already outgrown just because you are afraid of the unknown. As you let go, you join the flow of life that Watts spoke of, the great river that does not cling to any single bank. The river moves on, and so must you.